Patreon.com/DuckFeed.tv. Out! For those fireballs, Heartbeat City is taking your call, suffering. DuckFeed.tv. And now, from WDFD, The Duck, it's Heartbeat City with Cozy Snugglefield. 'Cause somebody out there feels lonely, and we're here to help. Hello and welcome to Heartbeat City. I'm your host, Cozy Snugglefield. With you as always, we're taking your calls, healing your hearts, taking your letters. Today in the studio, I'm joined by podcaster Brayton Cameron. Brayton, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm doing well myself. It's a beautiful day here in Heartbeat City. How was traffic? Did you have any kind of problem getting to the studio?
No, no problem. I followed your directions. I took Las Palmas to Colorado and then Colorado to Pico.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Some construction actually recently cleared up, so I'm glad that that used to not be the fastest way, and now it is. Mm-hmm. So glad that worked out for you. Yeah, let's go ahead and we got 3 letters this episode, and
okay.
Go ahead and get started here with the first one. So my spouse is pretty asexual 80% of the time, their own description, and only going through small phases of feeling frisky. It's been this way our entire relationship, except for maybe the first few months before they told me, and I'm okay with that. I've adjusted from being a very sexual person to being completely okay with this and happy in our relationship. The problem is that when sexy time does roll around, it's usually been so long that we don't really know each other's bodies very well, and it can be disappointing on both ends. Okay, but not great. We tell each other what we want, but it lacks the intensity that comes from familiarity. Our relationship is great otherwise. Any advice would be great. Thank you. So Brayton, what are your thoughts on this?
That's a tough call. Yeah, my thought is communication is always the key to everything, right? Even when you tell each other what you want, maybe it's not in the moment or whatnot, that you're quite getting your point across. There's a lot of ways that people can be embarrassed about that sort of thing, as well, especially if you're coming from someone who is maybe not as interested in being frisky or is on the lower spectrum of being sexual as opposed to someone who is maybe highly sexual or hypersexual. That might be some shyness involved. Yeah, that was my first thought too. In kind of getting past this is that even if everyone is great kind of on paper, I understand this idea of it feeling a little bit like you're restarting. Yeah. Because that kind of lack of familiarity and lack of intensity that can come with that is a lot of times the way that like sexual relationships that I'm in start. Cause, you don't know. And, I always try to use my words, but, there can be kind of a difference to that. Yeah. I would suggest, if I were to throw out an idea, and again, it's just an idea, I take it or leave it as you will. Non-sexual physical contact, increasing that, I think, could lend to more intimacy when it comes to each other's bodies. A little bit more understanding. Talking about massages, light touching, petting, things like that.
I was actually just about to bring that up. Is that that familiarity has kind of 2 parts. Like one of it is knowing the sexual response, but part of it, if there is that shyness or just discomfort with it in general, just being around each other's bodies and familiar in non-sexual ways might help. And that might be something, if you have this this kind of and this is not a damning phrase, this is a good thing, this compromise in the relationship in terms of two people's kind of sex drives there that you're fine with. You can't ask somebody to make time to do something they don't want to do, but you could make time for these other kinds of like body familiarity things. Mm-hmm. Like this might be like work, like asking somebody like, hey, you know what? We have a schedule, like tonight is a night we're going to cuddle around naked, in a non-sexual way, and give each other back rubs. Yeah. Like while we listen to a podcast or listen to the radio or something. Mm-hmm. And, maybe you don't feel like it at the time, but that is kind of putting in the work for that. And it's not violating anyone's kind of comfort level. It's not asking someone to be sexual when they're not. This is just that kind of physicality and touch and such. Right. That might help with that.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think this could be another situation where, I don't know how often you talk about love languages, where some people are physical and other people are verbal and things like that, where there might be a bit of a mismatch in that, as well, which is something that you can talk about and figure out how to work around. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that concept just to refresh our listeners' memory?
Sure. I'm not a super expert on it, of course, but, basically it is the way that you express or, take in love from another human being, or the preferred method that you do it. And some people are very physical people. Other people like to tell you that they love you. Other people like to do things for you, like, do favors or whatnot. There's, gift giving is also a love language, can be considered that. And there's, I believe, another one that I can't think of right now.
The mysterious fifth love language. That's about what I know about it as well. And I'm sure we brought it up on the show, but I don't think we've talked about it explicitly. But that's a great point, is that if words aren't doing it, there might be a mismatch with that. I'm very and you don't just fit into one of those categories and that's what you are. Most people derive some kind of pleasure or satisfaction from all of those things. Mm-hmm. But I personally, speaking personally, am a very verbal person. I like being told, that, and this is not just specifically love, but also in terms of sex and physicality. I like hearing words and I use words. And I've been with people where there's a mismatch where they are just quiet and they don't want to talk. Yeah. During it. And if that's the case, you might need to find another way. Now, obviously, some of that is kind of stretching, things a little bit. It's a little bit hard to think about how gift giving could fit into that, but it could. If here is a massage oil, here's something that here is another more NC-17 implement, and it's when you want this, when you're ready, I am really excited about this, and that kind of demonstrates enthusiasm, right? That you have, and for me, and this may not be true for everyone, but for me, enthusiasm is a real loop. One person being enthusiastic will make me more enthusiastic. And then it will kind of feed in on itself.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think, do we have any kind of wrap-up thoughts for this writer?
No, I don't think so. I think you're off to a good start. Clearly, you're in a good relationship, and that is, you're talking, and these are all good things, and it's just going a little bit further. Mm-hmm.
Just trying to get to this does not feel like an insurmountable problem. To me, it is, even if it does feel like you have to find, a lot of times I feel like the way to getting kind of good sex is through doing it a lot. And, this is on a slower time scale than that, but it doesn't mean that you can't get there. Yeah. It's going to require some kind of points in between. Dear Cozy, I've been with my partner for a number of years. Over the course of our relationship, she has come to terms with the fact that she is a biromantic asexual. I'm a straight sexual guy, but our relationship has gone well for years. We communicate pretty well and have a compromise in the relationship where we both have been pretty happy with our sexual situation. My needs are met, but not at the cost of her comfort. However, she does express semi-frequently that she's nervous that I will become dissatisfied and leave her for somebody who is sexual. I have occasionally had the same fear, but I've always told her in response that I would communicate this with her if I was unhappy with our situation. Recently, we had a conversation like this. I was feeling a bit like I wasn't completely satisfied in our relationship sexually, and we talked about it. The conversation went pretty well, and I left feeling like we had an understanding and that we were both happy in the direction things were going. We've had similar conversations in the past, and it's been okay. However, it feels to me like the sex we have had since then has not been very good for either of us. It feels that there's still a barrier between us. I even confirmed with her that she had no lingering issues. Any advice on how to proceed? Sex is not the most important part of our relationship, and I don't want it to cause a schism. It's possible that communication and compromise won't lead to a sexual relationship that either of us are fully satisfied with, but neither of us want to be the one that causes the death of our relationship. If we are sexually incompatible, do you have any suggestions on how we can still maintain a romantic relationship? It is worth noting that we are both monogamous. Yeah, also a kind of a spicy meatball, this one.
Right. Yeah. It seems, honestly, it seems kind of similar to what we were talking about on that episode of Teenage Dirtbags, weirdly enough, where it is the idea of one person being hypersexual and the other person being afraid of it. And that can cause a rift, absolutely. That can be very difficult for people to get over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a couple little pieces of this I think that we need to kind of unpack, like kind of bit by bit.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a couple different questions contained in this question, and let's work from the bottom up.
Okay.
Kind of, because the first, one piece of advice that you could, I'm glad that and this is signed to Ace of Hearts, very clever, is that a lot of times I think in these sorts of situations, one person, like there is kind of a pact made for one person to be able to go outside the relationship for this.
Yeah.
So for other listeners who are not as strictly monogamous, who are in a similar situation, that is an option.
Right.
That wouldn't work for me, and I'm not in this situation, but I would feel weird about that. So I understand if that feels weird and is off the table. But as far as if you maintaining a romantic relationship when you are sexually incompatible, I think is maybe not something that can work. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. But to me, it's that incompatibility. It's up to any individual person how far they want to compromise. But if someone is just saying, I just don't, one person's needs just aren't being met, that's not a stable foundation to kind of move forward, I think.
Yeah, I could see where you're coming from. Coming from the opposite side on this, or perhaps I'm more identifying with the partner rather than the Ace of Hearts in this case. When you say something like sex is not the most important thing in the relationship and you don't want it to cause a schism, but you are worried about that actually being the end of the relationship, it seems like perhaps it is more important than at least one of you is indicating.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be the most important part to be extremely important.
Right. And it is a thing that sometimes it just doesn't work out. And a fear that someone is not satisfying you sexually and that you are concerned that that person will leave because of your inability to satisfy them sexually, that's not a fear that's just going to go away. That's something that's going to linger on even if, perhaps they're not saying that it doesn't. It is something they're going to think about every time that they're engaged sexually.
Mm-hmm. Every time this person's not in the mood, it's going to feel a little bit like that. That's going to ding that insecurity bell.
Yeah. On both sides, I think, too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess it's worth talking about. I'm not trying to change the subject of this, but that specific fear is not confined to couples where one partner is sexual and the other one is less so.
Right.
That this is something that can happen in all kinds of relationships, right? Mm-hmm. Like that specific insecurity. And I say that just to make this person feel a little bit less alone. That's a very common kind of fear. But I do think that there might be some work to do on this as far as figuring out, taking a good kind of hard look at how compatible you actually are with this. Because one thing about compromise that I think is kind of tricky is that when you plan for a relationship that's going to have compromise, you need to give yourself very wide kind of margins. Because compromise, you can say like, I'd be great, I'd be fine doing this for a year, but what about year 2? year 3. Like, time continues to go on. These things have to be or end up being cumulative, you know? So something that seems fine now maybe won't feel fine kind of down the road. And this maybe sounds a little bit like that's what's happening, just in terms of, you know, the person who wrote the letter, saying that they have had this feeling of maybe that they would go outside the relationship, like not cheat, but end the relationship. Yeah. You know, and that these conversations continue to happen, and one has happened recently, might mean that kind of pressure, might be kind of building, you know?
Yeah. It's, I think there are other options as well. Like, sex doesn't always have to be, 2 individuals engaging in intercourse. And it maybe just broadening the definition of what you consider sex, where it could just be assisted masturbation or you know, something that involves toys, or just having another person present could potentially be satisfactory to the more sexual individual than nothing at all. Absolutely,
yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's a huge point, right? Is that it might be the kind of thing, something that we tend to think of with relationships, and this is something we talked about before on this show, is that, like, they have to be purely one-to-one transactional, you know, 2 sides of a scale that are perfectly balanced. And that's never the case. And it can be that sometimes this person who is not interested in sex, you know, you never should do anything you're uncomfortable with as far as rounding up to having sex, but asking somebody to, like, whisper in your ear while you masturbate is not a huge ask, you know, or something like that. And I think that there might be some room for some additional compromise if you kind of think outside the box.
Right.
You know, a
absolutely.
Little bit.
Right. To not to go off into too much of a rant, I'm very much against the idea of reciprocation. I think that that's like a false motivation that you, in concept, it's good. It's kind of like the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule, where the golden rule is do unto others as they would have, you know, do unto you, and the platinum rule is do unto others as they would like to be done unto. So the idea of almost starting this idea of obligation because a sexual act is performed, I think, can cause a lot of anxiety and issues with people. For sure. And when I talk about it not needing to be like a one-to-one balance, that's kind of what I mean. At the same time, though, I think people tend to kind of simplify to you know, just kind of reciprocating, because it's the easiest way of saying, I have needs and I am working to fulfill your needs, but I also have needs, and part of being in a relationship is you caring enough about my needs to try to fulfill those as well. Right.
You know? So, like, that doesn't have to your point, is that doesn't have to look like I go down on you and then you go down on me. You know, that can be any number of expressions of those needs. The important thing is that both parties, you know, I bring this up a lot on the show, but, like, I think communism is like a beautiful rule for a relationship, which is like to each according to their needs and from each according to their abilities. You know, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you sublimate your needs consistently.
Right.
You know, either, like, in that, in kind of rejecting that, like, reciprocity, you know, that doesn't mean you don't get to get what you want, you know, or what you need. Like, that still has to happen, and your partner should care about that. A good relationship, your partner cares about that and will work for that within the bounds of whatever makes them comfortable.
Right.
And that's why I think that it might be, you know, again, time to kind of take a look at this and see if it's doing okay. Like, I know that, you know, the writer says that everything's okay. But this can be a big problem, you know? Have you ever had any experience with like a long-term relationship with a serious mismatch?
I personally haven't. I mean, I've certainly heard stories. Another ace friend of mine told the story. I think you were there during it, talking about their partner who was hypersexual, and they even, you know, went to a sort of singles club, if you will, so that person could go engage in sexual activity while they just kind of hung out and like ate really fancy food. But it does become a very expensive thing to do that. So that can be a problem for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But it is an option. I don't know how well that worked out in the long term, but that was something that, when people are starting to figure out their own sexuality and whatnot, that there's going to be a lot of changing.
Mm-hmm. And that's the tricky thing if you are strictly monogamous,
Mm-hmm.
because that person in that anecdote was not.
Yeah.
If they went to, so I mean, I hate to have no advice. Like there's some advice with this, which I think is widening that kind of boundaries
Mm-hmm.
of what sex can constitute. But other than that, I do think that this can be kind of an issue. Would be my take from it. And then the second kind of part of the question, the other little bit in there, was that after you've had this conversation, it feels like maybe there's some lingering bad feelings that are causing sex to feel weird. I don't know how long that lasts. So if that's the first couple times you have sex after this conversation, I think that's pretty normal. If that continues and there either is kind of unaired grievances or somebody is uncomfortable even though they're saying they're comfortable, that's also something that I think needs to kind of be brought to a head. Mm-hmm. I don't think relationships can last and be good without pretty close to 100% openness.
Yeah. And it's very difficult to make a call on something like this where we only have one side of the issue and
absolutely.
We don't have perfect knowledge of everything. So, just keep talking.
Yeah, keep talking, and maybe that nervousness, like, if everything does work out and you do find a way to make this incompatibility, which sounds damning but isn't really, this compromise, if you find a way to make this compromise work, that nervousness that she feels that you might leave, or they feel that you might leave, might just be part of the relationship. I don't think anybody ever gets to like being 100% secure. And even when that does happen, people who are 100% secure get dumped. Mm-hmm. Like that security is always kind of an illusion. Like you can only weather forecast for so long. It's not any kind of relationship is a temporary agreement. It's not a binding contract forever. Cozy guest. I'm somebody who has recently come to terms with the fact that I am a romantic asexual. I'm getting somewhat hung up on one thing though. At what point in a relationship should I bring up the fact that sex just isn't something that's on the table for me? Part of me feels like it should be as early as possible so that the relationship isn't developing under false pretenses and a decision of whether this can work for everyone can be made before too many attachments are made. Another part of me worries that this might come off as extremely presumptuous, especially considering I'm a guy mostly interested in dating women. Thank you for any advice you can give. Signed, Sexless in the City. Yeah.
Well, as someone who's an ace, hi. Personally, I bring it up immediately whenever I go on, even, I've been using dating sites when I was dating, and it was on my profile and I would always bring it up before we even met. The problem that I discovered with this, and it feels somewhat manipulative in a sense, is that a lot of people I've met seem to be, willing to go on that first date and then are just like, well, I did the first date. That doesn't make me a terrible person, but I'm like, I don't understand what asexuality is and I'm confused and I don't want to have anything more to do with you.
Yeah. Do you mind if I step in and clarify that?
Please
a little
go
bit?
ahead.
I know what you mean because you and I have talked about it before. But the idea is somebody who knows that somebody who is asexual is not really for them, but still goes on that first date despite fully knowing.
Right. Exactly.
So it's not a question of the person who in this partnership who is ace wasting the other person's time. It's the person who is ace having their time wasted by somebody who is sexual.
Yeah, and I can go back on how cynical I am about it or not, but there is some time wasting about it. But at the same time, I feel like there are so few ace people that I almost feel like a bit of an ambassador, and that I'm kind of going out there and explaining what being ace is to them, and then maybe they're spreading it out to their friends. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I personally think as soon as possible, so that people aren't getting the wrong idea of what you're all about, and getting their hopes up, I guess. Yeah,
I think as soon as possible is the right answer. And I say that as somebody who's not ace, but as somebody who would want to know. And it doesn't, I understand about feeling presumptuous, and especially feeling presumptuous as, since I go on dating sites and I look at women, I see women who are ace, and I understand there's an angle as a guy where you don't want to say something like that because it can feel a little bit like almost like a line. Mm-hmm. Oh, just so you know, I'm not like those other guys. I'm not just trying to get into your pants, and that's, so you can see reluctance about that because the presumption then is just that is definitely going to happen. You're going to want it.
Yeah.
But no, I think that as adults, I think that, sex and talk about sex is enough, is open enough and is just kind of considered to be, even if it doesn't end up being part of the relationship, as it won't be in this case, it's still something that has to be, it's a part of relationships in general as far as something that needs to be kind of discussed.
Yeah.
It's on the table to talk about. So I think being as absolutely open as possible is your number one priority.
Right. Right. I think, I feel like if you're bi, you would do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, well, perhaps you wouldn't, because I know there's a lot of prejudice against bi people, as well. So, that's maybe a tougher call. There's not as much prejudice against ace, just people that just don't understand it.
Mm-hmm. I think that I've seen some online some prejudice about it, even if it is just people who don't understand it. But there's that way that ignorance can kind of can push into kind of cruelty.
Yeah.
So there's only so many times you need to say that you don't get it before it sounds like a judgment.
Yeah,
Sure. I've seen that. So. Yeah, I guess the other thing too, that I want to bring up is this is similar to another question we had that's very similar to this, early on, which is that, we assume and I project that this is a dating site, this person is on dating sites.
Sure.
Maybe they're not though. Maybe they're talking about, bars.
Yeah. In which case, I feel like, because there's usually a good move, a good moment, and you can never tell exactly when this is going to happen. And the older you get, the more obvious it is that when things are starting to transition from just being either getting to know someone into possibly dating that person. And if you're just meeting someone, you don't have to bring it up for the first time. It's I wouldn't tell my colleagues at work that I'm ace because it doesn't matter.
It has very little bearing on your logistics skills.
Yeah, possibly.
It's not like you're poly.
Yeah.
If you're poly, it would be on your resume.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be there. But yeah, and I think if the person is becoming interested in you and they're interested, they might want to date you, it's something that you should probably bring up casually. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it can be even early on, even so much as there's ways you can subtly bring this up, even if it doesn't seem like dating is going to be on the table. I don't know what those are, but I feel like there's ways. I think that's the way the wrestling is. You don't want to just be hey, just so you know, if it's somebody who is kind of flirting with you, at a party, because they could be too, at that point. And I don't know. I mean, do you know any way to kind of express this or hint at this without just kind of just saying it?
Yeah, the best way to bring it up is usually in casual conversation, someone will say oh, isn't that person sexy or something? And just be I don't know what that means.
Well, I think that one thing that specifically, I think that you have to be a little bit, I think that's a good time just to kind of say it.
Yeah.
Because if you just say, I don't know what that means, I think it has the cadence of a joke.
Yeah. Well, that's the way that I do it.
Like, yeah, well, I know. Because you and I are friends, and for a long time I didn't know this about you because I thought you were joking in those situations. So for most of our friendship, I had no idea because I just thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
And that I think that will get better as more people know about this. Like society will become more accepting, and now I try not to make those assumptions largely because of our friendship. And I think that hopefully with enough time, fewer people will take that as a joke and maybe think it means something.
Yeah.
Because it won't seem as outlandish, as more people are introduced to the idea. But yeah, if somebody is talking about, rating the super hunks, like if somebody, says something like, man, like, that's so,
which of the superhero Chris's is your favorite?
Yes. Which is the hottest superhero Chris, or like, man, that scene in Ragnarok where Jeff Goldblum's birthday, ship started having that fun sex party. And you could just be like, yeah, I didn't really do anything for me. I'm actually ace.
I don't remember that part at all.
I think there's some kind of line that refers to it. Like, oh no, he talks about having orgies in there.
Oh yeah.
And then also, yeah. So and you could just be like, yeah, they didn't do anything for me at all. I'm actually ace. Yeah. I think that's like a kind of a fun, casual way to bring it up. And you could bring it up with somebody who you don't, where dating is not explicitly on the table yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also, you could just flag. You can wear I believe it's a black ring on your middle finger, is a way to flag that you're ace, if people pick up on that sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. You can wear your flag colors, which I do on occasion. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if they don't pick up on the meaning, like they don't know the coding, they could ask about it.
Yeah.
And that's a great situation too, where someone's like, oh, that's a cool ring. And you'd be like, yeah, thanks. Yeah. It's actually the ace ring.
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, what's ace? And then you can be a brand ambassador.
Yeah.
Like Brayton. So like those are all great ideas, and I recommend doing them in addition to just disclosing, just because I think that this is not as, both sides as maybe it is presented. I think this is really just something that people need to know. Mm-hmm. And to the people who are doing the thing to you, Brayton, where they're just kind of like, they knew, but they just kind of did it anyway.
Yeah.
Like I've seen people on online dating sites who I think are extremely attractive and seem really, really cool and considered that. And I'd never done it, but I've thought just like before, like, man, like it's not like I want to change them. It's just more like I would enjoy the date part of this.
Yeah.
And that's a good time to make new friends.
Right.
If that's something you're in the market for. So, thanks everybody for writing in. If you have questions for me and my guests, you can always call in at 1-502-69-HBEAT. You can also write in at Gary@Duckfeed.tv. Brayton, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Where can people find you online?
Just the Teenage Dirtbags website, which is teenagedirtbags.co. If I remember correctly. I have a Twitter I don't use, so don't bother.
Excellent. And until next time, keep on feeling. Heartbeat City is intended for advice only and is not responsible for the consequences of following any such advice. If you have questions for Heartbeat City, please call in at 502-69-HBEAT or write in at Gary@Duckfeed.tv. Duckfeed.tv. Heartbeat City is produced by Boxer Kwan and Bryce Salad. Thank you.